5 prison escape horror stories. 1. Prison hike. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting eerie shadows across the dense forest, I found myself hiking alone along a secluded trail in the heart of the wilderness. My heart pounded with excitement and trepidation, as I was an avid nature enthusiast always seeking the thrill of the unknown. But little did I know that this adventure would soon take a terrifying turn. The forest was unusually quiet, the only sound being the rustling of leaves underfoot and the distant hoot of an owl. As darkness settled in, I switched on my flashlight, its feeble beam revealing gnarled tree roots and ominous silhouettes. Unfazed, I pressed on, drawn deeper into the woods by an inexplicable urge to explore the unknown. That's when I heard it. A faint rustling in the underbrush, like a wild animal stalking its prey. My heart skipped a beat as I scanned the darkness around me. Was it just my imagination playing tricks on me? But then, I heard it again, closer this time. Fear began to grip me, and I quickened my pace, the beam of my flashlight darting left and right. The rustling grew louder, accompanied by a heavy, labored breathing. Panic surged through me, and I realized I needed to find my way back to civilization. But as I turned to retrace my steps, a figure emerged from the shadows, blocking my path. It was a man, disheveled and filthy, clad in tattered prison garb. My heart hammered in my chest as I realized I was face to face with an escaped prisoner. His eyes were wild, his face covered in grime and sweat. He held a crude weapon, fashioned from a piece of jagged metal. My voice caught in my throat as he took a step closer, his gaze fixed on me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. "Who are you?" I stammered, trying to sound brave. He didn't answer, just continued to advance, his breath ragged and uneven. I stumbled backward, my mind racing for an escape plan. The forest was pitch black, and I had no idea where I was going. I needed to buy time. Desperation and fear fueled my instincts. I swung my backpack at him, hoping to disorient him for a moment. It connected, but he didn't falter. With a guttural growl, he lunged at me, and I barely managed to dodge his weapon. We were now locked in a deadly dance, the darkness conspiring against me. My flashlight flickered, threatening to die, and I knew I needed to act fast. I darted to the side, my heart pounding louder than ever, and made a desperate run through the tangled undergrowth. Behind me, I could hear the prisoner crashing through the forest, cursing and shouting obscenities. I had to put as much distance between us as possible. The woods became a blur of trees and thorns, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Just when I thought I couldn't go on, I stumbled upon a narrow stream. Without thinking, I plunged into the icy water, the shock of cold invigorating my senses. I waded upstream for what felt like an eternity, putting as much distance between us as I could. Hours passed, and the forest finally fell silent. I dared not move until the first rays of dawn broke through the trees. Exhausted and terrified, I eventually made my way back to civilization and reported the encounter to the authorities. The escaped prisoner was eventually captured, but the horror of that night would haunt me forever. The darkness of the forest had concealed a terror I could never have imagined, and I was lucky to have escaped with my life. From that day forward, I would never underestimate the danger of venturing into the unknown, for there are horrors that can lurk in the deepest, darkest corners of the world. 2. The Man at the Window. It was a chilly, moonless night, and I was huddled on my couch, wrapped in a blanket, engrossed in a gripping novel. The only sound that broke the eerie silence of the countryside was the occasional rustle of leaves outside my window. I lived alone in a small, isolated cottage, far away from the bustling city. It was the perfect place for solitude and peace, or so I thought. As I turned the pages of my book, a sudden thud from the front door sent shivers down my spine. My heart raced as I sat in the darkness, straining my ears to catch any more sounds. There it was again, a distinct but soft knock on the door, almost as if someone were testing to see if it was locked. I knew I had locked it, but fear not at me. With trembling hands, I reached for my phone and dialed 911. I whispered to the operator about the strange noises at my door, emphasizing the desolation of my location. They promised to dispatch an officer, but warned it might take some time due to the remote area. Cautiously, I tiptoed toward the window, the pale glow of the moon casting eerie shadows across the room. As I peered outside, I saw a figure lurking in the shadows, a man dressed in tattered, mud-smeared clothing, illuminated only by the faint moonlight. Panic washed over me as I realized this was no ordinary visitor. Suddenly, the man began to pound on the door, his fist striking the wood like a desperate plea for entry. "Let me in, please! They're after me," he cried out in a hoarse, panicked voice. I backed away from the window, my mind racing with fear and uncertainty. I couldn't let a stranger into my home, especially one who appeared so unhinged. The operator on the phone urged me to stay hidden and keep the doors locked until the police arrived. My heart pounded in my chest as I clutched a heavy candlestick, ready to defend myself if necessary. The man outside continued to plead, his voice growing more frantic with each passing moment. He seemed genuinely terrified, but I couldn't ignore the unsettling feeling in the pit of my stomach. I watched as he circled the house, his eyes darting around, searching for an escape. Suddenly, the sound of sirens in the distance brought relief, and the man outside heard them too. With a final, desperate plea, he bolted into the woods, disappearing into the darkness. The police arrived soon after, their flashing lights casting an eerie glow on my cottage. They searched the area but found no trace of the escaped prisoner. They explained that a dangerous convict had broken out of a nearby prison earlier that night, and they believed he had sought refuge in the woods. As I watched the officers comb the area, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped a horrifying encounter. The memory of that night haunted my dreams for weeks, and I couldn't help but wonder what might have happened if I had opened the door to that desperate, escaped prisoner. Free. Two desperate people. The night was dark and stormy. Rain cascading down like a relentless torrent, drumming a haunting rhythm on the roof of my car. I had pulled over onto the side of a desolate road in the middle of nowhere, my engine sputtering to a stop. My phone had lost signal miles back, leaving me stranded in this forsaken place. Panic welled up inside me as I realized how utterly isolated I was. I fumbled with the car's keys, trying to restart the engine, but it refused to respond. The eerie stillness of the night was shattered by the distant rumble of thunder, sending shivers down my spine. I knew I had to find help or shelter soon, but there was nothing but darkness and trees in every direction. As I debated my options, a flash of lightning briefly illuminated the surroundings, revealing a figure in the distance. Squinting through the rain-smeared windshield, I could barely make out a man stumbling towards me. He was soaked to the bone, his clothes clinging to his gaunt frame. Relief washed over me as I thought this might be my salvation. Perhaps he had a phone or knew of a nearby place where I could find help. With trembling hands, I cracked my window just enough to call out, "Hey, are you okay? Can you help me?" The man's face was obscured by the downpour, but I could see his silhouette draw closer. His steps were uneven, almost hesitant, and something about his gait sent a chill down my spine. Thunder rumbled again, louder this time, and I could see his pallid, terrified face more clearly. "Please, you have to help me," he pleaded, his voice a desperate whisper. "They're after me, and I need to get away." The urgency in his voice was undeniable, but my gut told me to be cautious. I had heard stories of escaped prisoners and their desperation. I was alone, vulnerable, and the isolation of the road weighed heavily on me. "I can't help you," I stammered, my fear making the words come out weak and trembling. "I'm stranded myself." The man's eyes widened in desperation, and he reached out, his wet hands smearing raindrops across my window. "Please, you don't understand. They're going to kill me if they find me, and I didn't do what they say I did." My heart pounded in my chest as I considered his words. Could he be telling the truth? Was he wrongly accused? But then another thought crossed my mind. What if he was dangerous? What if he had harmed someone and was using this stormy night as a cover for his crimes? I tried to keep my composure. "I'm sorry, but I can't help you. You need to find help elsewhere." The man's face contorted in anguish, and he took a step back, disappearing into the rain-soaked darkness. My heart raced as I watched him go, torn between empathy and self-preservation. Minutes later, I heard the distant wail of sirens approaching. I knew I had to stay put and wait for the authorities to arrive. The rain continued to pour, each drop a chilling reminder of the encounter. Had I made the right decision? Was the man truly innocent, or had I narrowly avoided a terrifying fate? As the police cars pulled up, I couldn't help but shiver, haunted by the unanswered questions and the eerie encounter on that stormy night. 4. Two on the Vine. It was a moonless night, and I found myself walking alone through a dimly lit alley in the heart of the city. I had taken a shortcut to get home faster, but my unease grew with every echoing footstep. The alleys were notorious for harboring trouble, but I had never encountered anything more sinister than a stray cat. As I continued along the narrow path, I sensed a presence behind me, a faint rustle of clothing that sent a shiver down my spine. My heart quickened, and I stole a glance over my shoulder, catching sight of two shadowy figures emerging from the darkness. My gut tightened as dread coursed through me. These were no ordinary late-night wanderers. In the feeble glow of a distant street lamp, I saw their faces, twisted with menace and desperation. They were escaped prisoners, their prison uniforms still clinging to their haggard bodies. Panic surged through me, and my hands trembled as I reached for my phone, only to realize it was still tucked away in my bag. "Hey you," one of them called out, his voice hoarse and threatening. "Give us your wallet and phone, and maybe you'll get out of this alive." My mind raced as I weighed my options. I was trapped, outnumbered, and unarmed. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to think of a way out of this terrifying situation. I could feel their eyes on me, assessing my every move. "I don't want any trouble," I stammered, my voice quivering. "You can have whatever you want. Just don't hurt me." I slowly reached for my bag, my fingers fumbling to retrieve my wallet and phone. As I handed them over, my mind raced, trying to find an opening, a chance to escape, but they were too close, too vigilant. "Now, your jewelry too," the other one demanded, his eyes cold and calculating. Tears welled up in my eyes as I removed a necklace and a bracelet, handing them over with trembling hands. The despair and helplessness I felt were overwhelming. I had never been so vulnerable, so utterly powerless. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the alley, and the two men whipped around, their attention momentarily diverted. It was my chance. I turned and bolted down the alley, my heart pounding in my ears. The adrenaline surged through me as I sprinted, my breaths coming in ragged gasps. Behind me, I heard the enraged shouts of the escaped prisoners, their pursuit growing louder with each step. Fear gnawed at my insides, but I pushed myself to run faster, my feet pounding against the wet pavement. My only thought was to escape, to reach safety. As I reached the end of the alley, I stumbled out onto a busy street. I didn't stop running until I had flagged down a passing police car, breathless and terrified. The officers responded swiftly, and together we went back to the alley, but the men were gone. I provided a detailed description of the two men, and the police assured me they would do everything in their power to apprehend them. I left the scene with a heavy heart, my nerves frayed and my sense of security shattered. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the terror of the encounter. The cold, menacing faces of the escaped prisoners haunted my dreams, a reminder of the night when I had narrowly escaped a horrifying fate in the depths of that dark, foreboding alley. 5. Wrongfully accused. The night was cold and unforgiving, with a biting wind that sent shivers down my spine as I walked along the desolate country road. I had decided to take a late-night stroll to clear my head, seeking solace in the stillness of the rural landscape. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie pallor over the surroundings. As I ventured deeper into the darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling of isolation that settled around me like a suffocating cloak. The only sound was the distant hoot of an owl, a haunting serenade to my solitude. I walked with my hands thrust deep into the pockets of my coat, my breath visible in the frigid air. Suddenly, the crunch of leaves behind me shattered the quietude, and I spun around, heart pounding. There, emerging from the shadows, was a figure, silhouetted against the moonlight. My pulse quickened as I watched the stranger draw nearer, the uneven cadence of his footsteps echoing through the night. I could feel the fear constricting my chest as he came into view, a man with wild, unkempt hair and ragged clothing that clung to his emaciated frame. His eyes were wide and filled with desperation, his breath ragged and visible in the cold. It was unmistakable. This man was an escaped prisoner. The scent of damp earth and decaying leaves filled the air, mingling with the metallic tang of fear that seemed to hang around us. My senses were on high alert, every sound and smell amplified in the stillness of the night. "Please," the man gasped, his voice a quivering rasp. "You have to help me. They're after me." The desperation in his voice was palpable, and I could feel a bead of sweat forming on my forehead despite the freezing temperature. I knew I had to be cautious, but something in his eyes tugged at my empathy. "I can't," I stammered, my voice trembling. I can't get involved." But as I turned to leave, I heard him collapse to the ground, wheezing and coughing. The icy fingers of guilt and compassion gripped my heart, and I couldn't just walk away from a man in such a dire state. With hesitation, I approached him cautiously, my every step marked by the crunch of leaves beneath my feet. The closer I got, the more I could see the desperation etched on his face. His hands were trembling as he reached out to me, and I could smell the acrid tang of fear on his breath. I crouched beside him, torn between fear and compassion. "What happened?" I asked, my voice trembling. He explained that he had managed to escape from a nearby prison, wrongfully convicted of a crime he didn't commit. He had been on the run, desperate for food and shelter, and he had stumbled upon me in his hour of need. As I listened to his story, I couldn't help but notice the palpable tension in the air. The stillness of the night, the scent of fear, and the overwhelming sense of vulnerability. My senses were heightened, and every sound seemed amplified, from the distant rustle of leaves to the faint whistle of the wind. The man's presence was a chilling reminder of the fragility of our existence, of how quickly our lives could be upended by circumstances beyond our control. I knew I couldn't let him stay with me, but I couldn't leave him in the cold either. With a heavy heart, knew that I would have to call the authorities. As I watched him eat, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease, a nagging suspicion that I had unwittingly invited danger into my world. The night wore on, and as the first rays of dawn began to break through the darkness, I made the difficult decision to contact the police. I couldn't harbor a fugitive, even one with such a compelling story. As I pulled my phone out, he lunged at me, swiping frantically for my phone with speed that only a desperate man could have. At that point I ran. As I ran, I called for help. As the authorities arrived to take him into custody, I watched him go, a mix of emotions churning within me, the vivid sensations of that night. The cold, the fear, the overwhelming sense of vulnerability lingered long after he had disappeared from view. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the haunting memory of that encounter. It was a night that had tested my compassion, my courage, and my capacity for empathy, and it served as a stark reminder that in the darkness of the night, we are all vulnerable to the horrors that can lurk just beyond our senses. Which story caught your attention the most? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. Until next time, stay safe. And thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Check out my website in the description below to see what I'm writing. And just below there are some suggestions related to what we talked about today. Peace.